Hey guys, this is Nebulism again, showing a video of Rifter PvP. And so, once again, we're fighting with a 400 millimeter plate type fit using ancillary rep. From previous video, you can kind of tell that this fit is decently strong, especially so for the Rifter. And the first fight I'm going to show here is a Punisher fight. It's a nice fight. It ends up, I think, going to a draw. And so, what I try to do during this fight is to, stretch out my tank a little bit, try to mitigate some range, try to do a little bit of flying back and forth and so on. And for his damage, you can see he's laying on actually the same guns I'm using, so we're both using 150 millimeters. Um, Other than that, I think he's pretty nicely tanked. Obviously, being a Punisher and taking this much damage, right up at the beginning. And I can't really break his tank. He's actually going to wear out my tank, and I'm going to pull range and escape. It's an interesting fight. Punishers are kind of hamstrung a little bit due to their mid-slit choices, and so they have pretty much terrible range dictation. And so a scram kiter can normally get away from them, and that's pretty darn useful because punishers often are bait anyways. So, given that he decides to stick around, I think we just saw that I switched to barrage, and I try to shoot him a little bit from range. And so I spent some time working on him and making sure not to burn up my modules, and keep at range and try to use my enhanced fall off to plink at him. But that also kind of comes at the cost that I'm not going to be able to. Probably keep a good tackle on him, and he'll be able to disengage if he just turns around at this point, or if he stays aligned to a particular target. But it was a good fight, and it was a nice show of how a little bit of a lower DPS endurance fight could work between something that's just so tanky that does relatively low DPS compared to compared to this Rifter. And for the remainder of this fight, I guess I'll just mention, yeah. So the Rifter here is 150 millimeter, 400 millimeter plate with an ancillary wrap, a typical scram kite package, afterburner, and so on. In the mids, it does require the power grid implant to handle that plate. And frankly, it might be even best to try out the 200 millimeter plate with the 200 millimeter, whatever they are, the larger auto cannons for rifters. For several reasons. One, there's a little bit better range attack on those guns, and DPS is a little bit better. Tracking, I believe, is a little bit worse. I have to look at it. And the plate, you still have some buffer, and you are kind of using this ancillary rep to survive anyways. Another thing that might be pretty nice about it is it doesn't require the implants, which are kind of a pain in the butt to deal with if you keep having to switch around implants depending on what ships you fly. So I might, in a future video, try to use the 200 millimeter plate set with some high grade snakes, because the Rifter does reasonable range dictation given that it is plated. And so with some high grade snakes, you actually might be able to do some cool things and have that durability anyways. Not quite as much as the 400 millimeter, but similar to the 200 millimeter. And so as you can see with this guy, he's going down, but so am I. And he actually made me burn through yet another set of charges, which pretty much means that both of us are playing a little skittish right now, him being low in armor and myself out of armor. And I believe at this point in time, one of us might be heading off, potentially. Or maybe not. And so, yet again, the fight continues. And what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to stretch out my armor rep and wait for that super long reload, which he's probably predicting is going to happen any time now. And he will probably try to chase or try to run away even, noting that the reloads are about to pop. So the smart thing to do probably here would have been to engage him before using my armor rep. but instead I didn't. So the next fight is going to be against a Tristan. These are fun because they're just such a bag of tricks. You don't know if you're fighting Kite or Brawl or Newt. In this case, he is going with obviously a package of Hobbs, and he's got Newts. And so the fit itself is a bit susceptible to Newts because the ancillary rep does need the Newts. However, it is plated, so there's a bit of buffer to work with in the event that the Newts, are sucking you dry. And then you more or less have to just maintain some kind of tackle kit on them and try to keep some type of range. I made a few mistakes here, especially with orbiting, because he's nuding me and he's not having guns. I should have just stayed at optimal and try to minimize transversal for the highest DPS. That was a little bit of piloting error. But in any case, he pops, and I possibly get the pod. No. All right, next fight is an Atron. These are a hell of a lot of fun to fight in this ship because Atrons are just, move right up next to you and blast you, which is a heck of a lot of fun to play. I can't wait to actually start flying a bunch of these and just lose, 100 of these, because there's just something to be said about the simplicity of turn everything on, overheat, and blap with those blasters. And so the Rifter actually has relatively nice speed match between the Atron. Clearly they go a little bit faster. The base hull speed is a little bit faster, and I am plated. But still, it does relatively nice damage. It's good hull exploiting damage with fusion. But I tell you, it took a while to get used to fighting Atrons. And there are a few guys like Suryag that are very proficient with their Atrons, and they're much harder fights because the Atron can disengage as well if they're not, if they're being a little skittish, and so that can be fun. Here's another Atron fight, just to kind of showcase what's going on, and here apparently my target lock decides to not be nice to me. The Atron engages me and gets a few shots off on me beforehand. I probably should have heated my afterburner a little bit earlier. It's really important to get out of that Atron's range and just try to load as much damage into them as possible. And then once you get out to like 4,500 meters or so, you're starting to minimize their gun damage and their blaster damage. And then you can think about, okay, when do you possibly want to reapproach, because they might start turning tail and leaving. And so you can see here, I actually lose point on him, and I have to repoint. Yeah, so Satrons are just a blast to fight, and apparently I do kill this capsule. So, waiting on the next fight. And apparently I loot him, even. Okay. This fight is a Condor. And with the Condor, you can tend to find a few different fits. The kitey missile fit. There might even be a disruptor fit I might have fought once. Oftentimes, kind of a light missile kite fit. So it's imperative to get some tackles on them. So you can see I preheated all my stuff effectively, because whether it's a slicer, whether it's a Condor, getting those tackles going and just trying to stay next to them is useful. And so here I'm more or less just keeping at range. He doesn't have anything. Once he's tackled, his kitey fit's going to go down real hard. To counteract that, obviously overheat them, WD, pray. Don't wait to keep at range. Just start spamming and just to get away, if you're a kiter. That's normally what the slicers do to get away from me. This fight was a little sneaky on my behalf. I've got several alts, and so a Dragoon will just murder a Rifter. Their newt pressure is way too strong, and it would be an instantly losing battle. And so I believe I brought in a collection of Thrashers and Catalyst with my two alts, and the Rifter was bait. And so it is kind of cool to play bait with this ship because it's got a little bit of tank, some EHP to at least absorb some initial alpha damage, and as you can tell, he starts going down real hard and fast, and that's just due to extra DPS on the grid. Apart from that, it is kind of a neat ship because not a lot of people expect a bait Rifter as much as they would say a Punisher. Here's a fun fight. It's kind of hit and miss when you fight comets, especially the blaster fits. Starting off at range is advantageous because they do just so much front end damage, and very careful tank management and range management is critical. Uh, at this point, you can kind of see that he actually has a little bit of better speed on me, and what I'm trying to do is figure out and deciding when I'm going to turn off my AB and when I'm going to start putting my reps up. And I might have been mistaken prematurely repped here, um, but that is what it is. And so I start getting this guy damaged a bit, and they're going to have basically they're a super Atron, right? So they're going to start active ancillary repping their stuff. And what I do is I'm a little worried he's going to run, which this possibly was a small mistake on my part. I probably could have waited a bit more and stayed back and tried to work through him a little bit better. But overall, he starts getting into my tank quite a bit, and I might have gotten a little bit greedy with the fight. So if I make a mistake here and I get within 1,500 meters, he can utterly melt me. At the moment, he's not, and so this kind of showcases how range dictation on these ships, especially when you're fighting blasters, if you could stay outside of 4,000 meters, you can do you can even take out to some degree faction frigates like the FNC. Now regardless, they might have piloting differences, etc., and so it might be kind of a losing battle regardless. But it's always fun to try. Kestrels are kind of neat. I fought two of these kinds, a rocket type as well as a obviously light missile kite, and there have even been some scram kitey or tracking disruptor kites. And so this guy is a rocket fit, and he's trying to keep me at range. Kestrels can actually be a little bit scary because they can pump in a lot of DPS that's focused right on the hole pretty readily. And so as you can see, what he's doing is he's apparently trying to chase. And what I'm trying to do is mitigate a little bit of that rocket damage so that I'm being pretty conservative on this fight, and then I get on top of him right at the end. And then I notice something a bit weird, which is something I've never fought before, which is an ancillary shield or ancillary armor rep Kestrel. And let's just say, yeah, I've never fought one of those. And now I'm in an area where he is doing decent damage. Rockets are pretty powerful. I pull a little bit of range to pull out of his rocket damage a bit, and then kind of yo-yo back and forth, and to get the tackle package back on. I make a little bit of a mistake here and burn my afterburner, but in the end, it ends up paying off. I think I've fought this Kestrel pilot actually several times and have lost to him, so that's probably why I've been so delicate fighting that particular pilot, because they can do a surprising amount of DPS. On the next fight, I'm apparently waiting for a Tormentor, and so often this is a nice ship, right? You can beam kite Tormentors. There are a variety of different Tormentor strategies, and they have a pretty sweet kiting capability, and so I find myself in actually kind of a crappy spot for a scram kiter versus a pure kiter. But I think he is a scram kite fit. And so what he's going to do, he approaches me, I approach him. I heat some stuff up, just not knowing exactly what to expect, and start laying into him. And at this point, I make a decision, which is, his guns versus my guns, which ones might track better. You can see their beam. So beams kind of do have some crappy tracking. And so I say, okay, I'm going to try to get in under his guns a little bit and work some damage into his tank. As you can see, he's ancillary rep fit, and he can tank reasonably well. I mean, I probably would have broken his tank even without anything else, but in any case, getting in underneath and trying to get underneath his guns was something I was trying to focus on. Here's a fight that is normally a loss whenever, especially against Shig. Daredevil versus Rifter is clearly not a balanced fight, one on one, anyways. And whether or not I try any shenanigans about trying to bring in alts, I honestly can't remember. But I do get on top of him, and he gets on top of me, and obviously it's going to just utterly burn me down. And clearly he pops me at that point in time. Frankly, a Rifter versus Daredevil is something that I normally don't do unless I'm bait. And there are going to be a few other losses, I think, here, so I tend to show all the losses now at the end. And so here's a good fight. You know, hook bills are tough. Hook bills have a variety of packages that either make them tanky as hell or really nice range dictation. And so, unfortunately, I'm not sure if I show whether or not he's double webbed me or not, but he's doing pretty significant rocket damage, along with the fact that he's got superior range dictation. Yeah, he's probably double webbed me since I'm going 200 instead of 400 with my afterburner. And so he basically just kite me for days and effectively wrecked that Rifter. I don't think I have any successes against Caldari Navy hook bill on this Rifter. And I've probably flown, killed, and lost, killed more than 50 with the Rifter and lost similar. And so, in and of itself, the Caldari Navy hook bill is pretty rough. So Black is a cool guy. I actually fly with him now since I'm in Hull Pen now. He flies a slicer, and already you can tell I'm screwed. He flew way the heck out of there, and he flies a nice kitey slicer, the typical kitey slicer package. I think they usually do have a little ancillary built into them anyways. It's one hell of a ship, and he flies snaked normally, so I'm pretty much screwed. I try to slingshot him. It's not going to happen. And then effectively it's just going to be a whittle you down kind of experience. It is good, though. I do like losing ships to these kinds of experiences because really mastering the slingshot, especially on a plated ship, is extremely difficult. You don't have a lot of ability to swing back and forth, and his agility and range dictation is just so much better. But you can always try, and I think it's much better to take fights and lose them and learn something than just sit there and avoid slicers. Hey, and I've also killed slicers with this Rifter that are kite fit, and even some that presumably have had some snakes. It's just sometimes you manage to catch them before they leave, they land on a good spot, etc. In this case, I think I fought Black several times, and lost all those times just due to his superior range dictation and piloting abilities. Here's an example where it's like it got extremely close, and I totally spaced not having a overheat on my point or web. And that would have been nice because I probably would have caught him. I'm not sure if I would have killed him even if I caught him because, he does have his little bit of an Ansel rep, and I was already pretty deeply damaged. And so, we get out of here and get ready for the next fight. So here's this Kestrel again. So we saw earlier that I killed West Chemistry. Now we're going to see me lose to West Chemistry, I have a feeling. I thought, hey, Kestrel, let's roll on in and just brawl. And didn't pay attention to rockets. Thought, oh, okay. Probably should have, pull a little bit of range to those little yo-yoing tactics that I did. In the past, I've even whittled him down with barrage. And the other thing that's pretty noticeable, right, is his range dictation capabilities are nice. So whether or not he's snaked, I'm not sure. I mean, 613 MS with a well, there was a web on him at some point, and it kind of indicates that he's pretty quick. I'd have to actually fly a Kestrel to look at what they're like when you get one web on them with a typical AB fit. But he ends up doing a really nice job of doing what I did to him in the previous videos. The fight does get pretty close, and I'm basically just trying to work those guns, and he's fighting me. He's doing a really good job at keeping it right at the edge of the range of rockets and fighting me in deep fall off. So that's props to him for a really good fight. All right, so in this next fight, this is a loss. But I haven't gotten a chance to see how much of a loss Kikimoras are until recently, and so the new trig ships are obviously OP in many regards. For this Desi is pumping out shots that are respectable. You can get some crazy DPS, and he's not even spun up yet. And so clearly, going to get wrecked here. Good exercise though to kind of see how bad his loss. Honestly, this Rifter does not fare well against, and many frigates don't fare well one-on-one against destroyers unless unless it's a terrible fit or some other kind of pre-existing condition that makes it easier. Mismatch kind of fight, etc. Here's a fight where this is a good fight. I know he's blaster, I know he's tanky, and so I'm gonna pull a little bit of range, right? You see me hammering the range button. I actually set up pretty much everything I want to set up. He webs me down, I web him down, and he ends up pulling a decent amount of velocity and closing in on me just a little bit, right? And so here's an advantage where perhaps there's a slight bit of range dictation improvement on, or advantage on the Merlin, because shield versus the plated fit on the Rifter. And you can tell he's blasting me, I'm blasting him. He gets within that dangerous range for blasters. He's at 27, 2800 instead of my desirable 4500. I do get a little ways away and break through his shield, which is a small victory, and the fight goes pretty close, frankly. If a little bit better maybe piloting on my part, maybe a little bit of better lucky shots, etc., would have helped. But in the end, it was a good fight, and it was pretty close. So here's a fight against an RFF. Most of the time, this is a bad matchup just because the RFF is effectively a super Rifter. They basically get another mid, and they can either do good range dictation, they can do... So you can see he's already fit, but he also has good range dictation. So he's moving at 600, I'm moving at 200, and I'm pretty much host. At this point in time, it'd probably be best to kind of move back and forth a little bit, or whichever. But frankly, it's a pretty difficult fight to stand up to one of these in a Rifter. I have killed a few, and as you can see, I actually did an okay job fighting this guy. He got, I think, a bit too aggressive and could have fought me in a little bit of a deeper fall-off. He was probably too worried about me warping away and took some unnecessary damage. But those Rifters eventually chew through my tank, and those Arties chew through my tank, and that's it. Well, thanks again for watching. That's pretty much the end of this series of videos with some losses and victories, respectively. I think hopefully you enjoyed, seeing that the Rifter doesn't suck, so to speak. It's not the best, of course, but you can do some fun things with it and get good fights. All right, see you guys later.